This kid shows up with an arrest warrant in his hand. Didn't even know who I was. I'm the one who signed off on his badge 6 months ago. And all of this because Karen, queen of the damn HOA, decided her rules outrank state law. How the hell did it get that far? Stick with me. This one's gonna mess with your head. Thing is, when we bought that house, I wasn't looking for trouble. Hell, I was barely keeping my head above water. It was just me and Ellie, my daughter. She'd turned 15 a few weeks after we moved in, and she'd been through more than most grown folks I know. We lost her mom to cancer the year before, and that girl, man, she tried to act tough, but I knew better. She didn't sleep through the night for months. Wouldn't talk about it either. She'd just put her earbuds in and stare out the window like she was watching a different world. Me, I was trying to fake it till I made it. We both were. I'd been with the sheriff's department for years. Started off as a street cop, worked my way up. Had my fair share of bar fights, meth houses, and long drives back from scenes that made you rethink your job. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what it feels like to bury the only woman you ever loved and then look into your kid's eyes and not have a damn clue how to fix it. So when I finally scraped together the down payment on that little craftsman house on Willow Ridge, I thought it was going to be the start of something good. Fresh air, decent schools, no sirens at night. You know, peace, or at least the illusion of it. That house was nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, warped fence, beat-up porch swing that screamed tetanus, but it was ours. First thing Ellie did was hang a photo of her mom by the window facing the yard. Said she wanted her to see the trees. First thing I did was plant a cedar in the back. We used to have one outside our old place, and it was my wife's favorite tree. That one was for her. Funny how you can pour so much hope into wood, dirt, and roots and convince yourself it's healing something. The neighbors seemed all right at first. Quiet, polite, you know the type. You wave, they wave, nobody asks questions, which was just fine by me. I wasn't ready to be anyone's best friend. We were still unpacking boxes and figuring out how to exist without a third plate on the dinner table. Then came Karen. I remember it clear as day, because it was the only knock I heard on that door for the first 2 weeks we lived there. Sharp, rhythmic, like someone knocking on a cop's cruiser at a DUI checkpoint. I opened up, and there she was. Mid-50s, ironed blouse, clipboard in one hand, Tervis tumbler in the other, like she just walked out of a PTA meeting. Except this wasn't school business. This was HOA territory. She smiled like a dentist. All teeth, no warmth. "You must be the Harpers," she said. "I'm Karen Whitmore, president of the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association. I just wanted to personally welcome you to the community." I said thanks, gave her the tight-lipped, please go away, smile. Ellie didn't even look up from the sofa. She could smell bullshit from the driveway. Karen handed me a manila folder like it was a legal summons. "This is the welcome packet," she said. "Just a few things to get you familiar with our standards and expectations." "Standards and expectations," I repeated. "Every community has them," she said, laughing like that made it all normal. I flipped through the folder after she left. 34 pages. 34, and half of it looked like it was typed up by someone who thought Microsoft Word made them a lawyer. There were rules about holiday lights, rules about acceptable porch furniture, even a color palette for shutters, which I found hilarious considering half the houses had mismatched siding from the 90s. Some of it sounded made up. No wind chimes audible from the curb? Really? But I wasn't trying to start a fight. Not then. We had enough going on, just getting Ellie into school and trying to keep the house from falling apart, so I figured stay quiet, mow the lawn, don't park like an asshole, and we'll be left alone. Karen didn't get that memo. First week after her visit, I caught her walking slow along our property line, not just strolling, inspecting, like she was mentally measuring the length of our mailbox post. She had that same clipboard tucked under her arm. I waved, she didn't wave back, just nodded and kept moving. Next day, she was back, this time talking to old Mr. Delaney across the street. He was nodding, she was pointing, straight at our house. Maybe the cedar, maybe the flag Ellie had taped inside the window. I don't know, I told myself not to care. You know how you do that thing where you pretend not to notice something that's pissing you off because you don't want to make it worse? That was me, daily. Ellie didn't say much about it. She never liked her school principal either and handled Karen the same way. Ignore, avoid, keep earbuds in. But I started to get that itch in my gut, that old sixth sense that kicks in when someone's about to escalate. Not because they have to, because they want to, because they get off on it. And Karen? She had that glint in her eye, the one that says, "I'm watching." I'd seen that look in interrogations. in power-drunk security guards and failed cops who wanted to be in control of something, anything. She wasn't just running a homeowners committee, she was ruling it. But again, I told myself, don't poke the bear, let it go, keep your head down. I thought I could stay out of her way. Turns out, that was never an option. It started with the damn gates. The house came with these old wrought iron gates, nothing fancy, but they had character. Black with a bit of rust around the hinges, heavy as hell, and they creaked when you pulled them shut. I liked them. Reminded me of places that had been around long enough to matter. Ellie said they looked goth in a good way, which I took as high praise. Anyway, I'd cleaned them up, took a wire brush to the rust, oiled the hinges, slapped on a couple coats of flat black Rust-Oleum. That was it. Not even a color change, just restoration. You know, maintenance, I guys, grown-up stuff. Didn't think twice about it. 3 days later, I get a letter in the mailbox, not mailed, just slid in, no stamp. The return address said Willow Ridge HOA, and the envelope was the kind you'd expect a birthday card to come in, blue glittery edges. I remember thinking maybe it was a welcome note from a neighbor. Stupid me, inside was a notice of violation, not a warning, not a friendly suggestion, a violation, for unauthorized modification of front-facing structures not approved by the HOA Aesthetic Committee. Apparently the color of my gates was non-compliant with the community standard iron black, spec code B241, which according to the paper had a slightly warmer undertone. I read it 3 times. Warmer undertone. What the hell was I being fined for? Paint chemistry. The fine was $75. Not much, sure, but it wasn't about the money, it was the principle. I walked around the block later that day just to check, and saw at least 6 other homes with gates. Half of them weren't even painted at all, just bare metal and rusting like old tractor parts. One had a broken hinge that had been duct taped. No pink envelopes in their mailboxes. I stood there staring at one of those gates and just started laughing. Not because it was funny, that kind of laugh you let out when you realize you're being screwed with and there's nothing subtle about it. So I took the notice and walked right over to the HOA drop box next to the community bulletin board by the pool. Karen was there. Of course she was, sitting on one of those fake wood benches like she was waiting for me. She smiled that same cold smile. "Hello again, Jack. Everything all right?" I held up the envelope. "Got your love letter. Guess..." "Oh, that," she said, waving it off like it was no big deal. "Just a minor compliance issue. Happens all the time. You should have submitted a color request before repainting." "I didn't repaint," I said. "Just touched it up with the same black it always had." She tilted her head like I'd just said something confusing. It looked different to me. Maybe the finish. Hard to say. Either way, we have procedures. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about the gates. Hell, it was never about the gates. I knew the tone, knew the posture, knew the way her eyes lingered just a second too long. She wasn't here to keep up appearances, she was staking territory, marking the fence. This was a test. First prod of the cattle prod to see if I'd kick or stay quiet. I dropped the envelope into the box and said nothing, just looked at her. She looked back like she'd already won something. I walked off, slow and calm, but I could feel the muscles in my jaw clenching like I'd just bit into cold steel. That night, over dinner, I told Ellie. She rolled her eyes and said, "Can we paint them neon pink next time? See what she does." I smiled, but deep down I felt it. The tension, the quiet threat in a $75 envelope. It was too specific, too fast, too targeted to be random. That was the first time I thought, this woman's gonna be a problem. I didn't know how big yet, but I knew she wasn't done. It didn't stop with the gates. Of course it didn't. See, Karen wasn't just testing the waters. She was checking how deep she could wade in before anyone pushed back. And because I didn't bark after the first jab, she decided it was open season. Couple weeks later, I came home from a shift to find another note in my mailbox. Again, not mailed. Another glittery-ass envelope that looked like it should have had a kid's birthday invite inside. This one said I was being fined for unauthorized landscaping changes. I stared at it for a solid minute before I realized what she was talking about. The cedar. The same cedar I'd planted out back, a good 20 feet from the sidewalk, barely even visible from the street unless you had a drone or a damn sniper scope. That tree was for my wife. There was nothing unauthorized about it. The land was mine, the tree was legal, and I sure as hell wasn't asking permission to plant something in her memory. That one set me off. I called the HOA number on the letter. Went straight to voicemail. No surprise there. A couple days after that, the garbage bins got knocked over while we were out. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, just a mess like someone wanted it to look sloppy. Ellie thought it was raccoons, but raccoons don't unscrew the lids and place them neatly in the driveway. Someone wanted us to know they'd been there, and then came the noise complaint. That one almost made me laugh. Ellie had been practicing violin in her room, headphones on, plugged into one of those silent digital setups. No speakers, just her and the strings. And yet, I got a notice saying our home had generated persistent noise, disrupting community harmony. Harmony. That word again. Karen loved words like that. Always made it sound like she was defending something beautiful when really she was just drunk on control. Next came the accusation about the dog. Except we didn't have a dog, not even a visiting one. But someone claimed they'd seen a large, aggressive canine loose on our lawn and that it had chased a child on a scooter. I checked the security camera on the garage. It hadn't picked up anything, not even a shadow. I filed an appeal, and surprise, it was denied. But the one that really stuck with me, the one that told me things were about to get a whole lot uglier, was the camera. I'd just come back from picking up dinner one night, and Ellie was out back messing with the sprinkler system. She waved me over and pointed at the oak tree near the fence line. High up, tucked into a crook in the branches, was a little black square, glinting in the porch light. We didn't own a camera. I sure as hell didn't mount anything up there. I grabbed a ladder, climbed up, and pulled it down. It was a cheap wildlife cam. SD card inside, motion activated, pointed directly at our bedroom windows. Now look, I've seen some weird shit in my time. I've worked cases that made me question humanity entirely. But this wasn't just petty HOA stuff anymore. This was personal. Someone was watching us, watching my daughter. I took the camera inside, locked it in the safe with my service weapon, and sat on the couch trying to slow my heartbeat. Ellie didn't say anything, just sat beside me, eyes fixed on the floor. She didn't ask if it was Karen. She didn't have to. We both knew. That weekend, I noticed Karen walking by again. Slower than usual, clipboard in hand, not writing, just observing. She had this look like she was cataloging something, like she was mentally moving furniture around in a house that wasn't hers. The next letter was about non-standard window decor. You know what that was? The picture Ellie had taped to the glass, the one of her mom, a laminated photo of her smiling on the beach, holding a cup of gas station coffee, hair all tangled in the wind. I'd walked past that photo every morning since we moved in. That little face reminded me why I got up and went to work, and Karen called it non-standard decor. I crumpled the letter on the spot. Didn't even read the fine. I knew by now it didn't matter. Then came the anonymous tip to animal control. And this one got real. They showed up looking for signs of neglect. Asked about pet licensing, said they had a report of multiple aggressive animals being harbored at the residence. I laughed at first, then realized they weren't kidding. They were doing their job. Someone had made it sound real enough that they had to follow up. I gave them a tour, let them walk the yard, check the shed, whatever they needed. They were polite, embarrassed even, but thorough. One of them finally looked at me and asked if I'd pissed anyone off lately. I told him. Apparently. By the time I got back inside, Ellie had locked her door, wouldn't come out for hours. That night I stood by the back window, looking at the dark silhouette of the tree line where that camera had been, and I knew this wasn't just some HOA nitpicking anymore. This was a campaign, coordinated, escalating. And Karen, she wasn't just poking anymore, she was pushing, seeing how far I'd bend before I broke. But I wasn't gonna break. Not yet. I didn't go in guns blazing. That's not who I am. Despite what people think when they hear sheriff, I don't go looking for a fight. I believe in procedure, in channels, and at that point, I still thought, stupidly maybe, that this could all be settled like adults. So I started with what I knew. Documentation. I went through every single letter Karen had left in my mailbox, every pink envelope, every violation notice, every fabricated complaint. I laid them all out across the dining table, lining them up like puzzle pieces. It was a damn collage of nonsense. Most of it wasn't even properly formatted. Some were missing signatures. One had a date stamped 3 days before we even moved in. Another referenced a violation about a shed I didn't have. It was sloppy, careless, but it was enough to make life hell. That's the thing about a constant drip. It doesn't flood your house all at once, but it wears down the foundation. I made copies, took pictures, compiled everything into a neat, labeled binder. Then I did what I thought was the adult thing. I called the HOA office, left a message asking for a formal meeting. No callback. I waited a few days. Nothing. So I wrote a letter. Polite, professional, not even a hint of sarcasm. I laid out my concerns, asked for a chance to discuss things directly, maybe clear up some confusion. I left it in their Dropbox with a read receipt form because I'd seen how fast things could disappear. A week later, I got a response. Not a meeting request, not a phone call, another envelope. This time it was a notice of escalating noncompliance and a warning that any continued attempts to subvert the authority of the HOA board could result in legal action. Subvert the authority. That one got me. I read it twice, standing there in the driveway. Ellie was inside doing homework. The sun was going down. Birds chirping, neighbors walking their dogs. Everything looked normal, peaceful, and here I was, holding a threat disguised in soft font and pastel-colored stationery. So I went to the city. I filed a formal complaint with the Code Enforcement Office, attached copies of the notices, and explained that the HOA was targeting me with baseless citations and enforcing rules that weren't in the city's records. The guy at the counter looked tired, said they don't usually get involved in HOA disputes but took my report anyway, promised someone would follow up. No one did. After that, I called a friend of mine, civil attorney, good guy, used to be on the council for another district. I asked him to take a look at the documents. He scanned through the beta binder, looked at me and said, "You're not crazy, but you're dealing with someone who knows exactly how to abuse power without technically breaking the law." He offered to write a letter on my behalf. We sent it. Certified mail. Karen responded by issuing a new violation for abandoned equipment in plain sight. The abandoned equipment? A garden hose I'd coiled neatly next to the faucet on the side of the house. That's when I decided to go to the state. There's an agency, buried in the bureaucracy, that deals with HOA oversight, sort of. They have a complaints portal, and I spent 2 hours filling out the forms, uploading documents, and detailing everything. I tried to keep emotion out of it, just the facts, just the violations, just the timeline. A month went by, no reply, nothing but a generic submission received auto email. Meanwhile, the harassment kept coming. Ellie found a note tucked under the windshield wiper of her bike. Her bike. Handwritten, unsigned. Said something about not everyone being welcome here and how some people should learn to follow the rules before someone gets hurt. She didn't tell me right away. I only found out because she broke down crying after school, scared to ride home. That broke something in me. I can take a hit, but not her, not my girl. I reached out to a couple neighbors. Casual conversation at first. Weather, lawn care, whatever. Then I asked if anyone else had been getting strange notices. Most clammed up, looked away, said they had no problems with the HOA. One guy, older, with a limp and a slow drawl, just shook his head and muttered, "Best to just keep your head down, son." But not everyone was afraid. Stacy, mom of 3, lived 2 houses down, pulled me aside one day. Said Karen had fined her for having sidewalk chalk on the driveway. Chalk. Her 5-year-old drew a rainbow and a cat, and Karen called it graffiti. Stacy was done, said she'd been quietly documenting things too. We swapped notes. Patterns started to emerge. Same phrases, same targeting language, same sudden violations after any pushback. She offered to get others to speak up, said maybe we could bring something forward together. I told her I wasn't ready for a fight. Not yet. I still believed we could go through the right channels, build a case, present it to the board. Surely someone had to be reasonable. She gave me a sad smile like she'd already learned what I hadn't. Still, I tried one last thing. I showed up at the next HOA meeting. Didn't make a scene. Just signed in like everyone else. Sat in the back. Karen saw me. Didn't flinch. Didn't blink and just smiled and went on with her prepared speech about preserving the community standard. When the open comments portion came, I stood up. Introduced myself. Laid out my concerns as respectfully as I could. Asked for clarity on the rulebook, accountability in citations, transparency in enforcement. Karen let me speak, nodded the whole time. then thanked me for my passion for the neighborhood and said, "We'll take your feedback into consideration." That was it. They adjourned. People shuffled out. No one looked at me except Karen. On her way out, she paused, smiled that same goddamn smile, and said, "I do hope this won't become a distraction from your duties, Jack. I know how busy law enforcement can be." That was the moment it hit me. She wasn't going to stop, and the system I believed in, the one I tried to go through step by step like a good citizen, it wasn't going to save me, not from her, not from people like her. I still thought I could handle it, still thought if I just kept going, something would shift, but it didn't. It got worse, a whole lot worse. I didn't see it coming. I mean, I knew things were bad. I knew she had it out for me, but even then, even after the notes, the fines, the camera, the threats, I never thought she'd go that far. I was in my kitchen, still in uniform, boots off, half a sandwich in my hand, when I saw the patrol car pull into the driveway. It wasn't one of mine. Wrong precinct, wrong beat. And when two deputies I didn't recognize stepped out and walked to my door, I already knew something was off, the kind of wrong you can feel in your chest before your brain catches up. I opened the door and saw the guy in front holding a folded piece of paper, thick cardstock. "Official, Jack Harper?" I raised an eyebrow. "You know damn well who I am." He looked uncomfortable. "Wouldn't meet my eyes. We've got a warrant." My stomach dropped. For what? Suspicion of intimidation, harassment, and threatening conduct toward a sitting HOA official. "Signed off this morning." I blinked. I actually laughed for a second. Thought it was a joke. Then I saw his partner shift nervously, resting a hand on his belt like he wasn't sure what I was going to do. "You're serious," I said. "We're just doing what we were told," he said. "You do know who I am, right?" I asked again. "You're standing in the driveway of the sheriff of this county." He paused, looked at me again. Realization flickered across his face like a match in the wind. "Shit," he muttered. "You're that Harper." I stepped back into the house, hands raised just enough to say I wasn't going to make their day harder. "You better call your supervisor. Right now." They did. Took 10 minutes. By the time it was sorted out, someone higher up had made a few calls, and they were both pale as paper, apologizing all over themselves. Said the complaint came through unusually fast. Said it came with a pile of affidavits, photos, statements, some of it anonymous, all of it pointing back to me. They couldn't say it, but I could read between the lines. Karen had built a file on me, a case, fabricated, twisted, dressed up to look official, and someone somewhere had bought it, at least long enough for a judge to sign off on a warrant. I didn't get arrested, but I got something worse. I got a taste of what it feels like when your own system turns on you, when the badge you've worn your whole damn life doesn't mean a thing, when your word is suddenly worth less than someone else's lies. The next morning, my inbox was flooded. Media inquiries, internal affairs notices, board members texting me things like, "Is this true?" and "What the hell happened?" One of my own deputies sent me a screen grab of a post from a neighborhood Facebook group. Karen had gone public. Carefully, of course, not directly accusing me, but raising concerns about an incident involving local law enforcement and HOA safety. The words were vague, but the intent was razor sharp. She'd officially gone from neighbor to campaign manager in her one-woman war, and I was the target. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in the living room while Ellie dozed on the couch, hugging her knees like she was 5 again. The place was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Every scenario ran through my head, every angle, every stupid moment I'd let slide because I thought I was the adult in the room. Karen had crossed a line. That wasn't new, but now she'd crossed my line. Next morning, I stepped out onto the porch to grab the paper, and there it was, sitting on the top step, a plain manila envelope. No name, no stamp, just the word Jack, written in black marker. Inside, a stack of documents, printouts, handwritten notes, HOA meeting, transcripts, bank statements, screenshots, photos. One of the pages had a spreadsheet that listed fines issued over the last 2 years, names, addresses, amounts. Karen's name showed up in the payment approvals column over and over. Most of the targets were new homeowners. Minorities, single parents, vets, anyone who didn't fit her mold. Near the back was a typed letter, unsigned. It read, "I worked under her. I saw everything. I was too afraid to speak up. I can't be anymore. Do what you have to do." No name, but I recognized the handwriting on the notes. Bob, the old guy who always wore a Cubs cap and kept to himself at the HOA meetings. He used to be the treasurer, I remembered now. Resigned last year. No explanation. He hadn't just seen things. He'd documented everything, and he'd just handed me the match. Everything shifted in that moment. Every instinct in my body changed direction. This wasn't a war of words anymore. It wasn't about keeping peace or playing nice. She tried to ruin me, almost succeeded. But now I had something real. I wasn't just going to defend my name. I was going to burn the whole damn machine down. I didn't move right away. I sat with that envelope for hours, just reading and rereading, trying to get a grip on the weight of what Bob had handed me. It wasn't just paperwork, it was a slow-motion confession, a time bomb, waiting for someone willing to light the fuse. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I wasn't angry, I wasn't frustrated, I was focused. I knew better than to rush in swinging. I'd seen what happened to people who played their hand too early. Karen was cunning. She didn't make wild moves, she built traps. Quiet, subtle, believable ones. If I went at her with emotion, she'd twist it into another incident. Another weapon. I couldn't afford that. Not with Ellie still walking to school past the same people Karen whispered to, not with half the neighborhood still afraid to make eye contact, so I took my time. I went quiet. First step was verification. Every document Bob gave me, I cross-checked it. I matched handwriting, double-checked names, found the original filings where I could. Some of the HOA records were public. Others I had to get creative. A friend in the records office owed me a favor, and I called it in. He didn't ask questions, just got me what I needed. Internal budgets. Meeting minutes. Contractor invoices. Funny thing, Karen had authorized lawn maintenance fees that didn't match actual services performed. Same vendor, same amount, every month, even when it rained for 3 weeks straight and nobody's lawn got touched. I pulled photos from Ellie's phone. She'd snapped a few shots of HOA announcements Karen posted on the bulletin board, the kind with the cheap plastic covers. They lined up perfectly with the ones in Bob's file, same exact language. I didn't need much more to confirm it. This wasn't some disgruntled old man trying to stir up drama. Bob had receipts. All of them. The most damning piece? A letter. Karen wrote herself to the architectural subcommittee approving the removal of 2 trees that were later billed under safety repairs, which turned out to be the same month her niece got a landscaping job. Nepotism, embezzlement, conflict of interest. You name it, she had her fingerprints all over it. But even with all that, I needed more. So I reached out to Stacy. She was the only neighbor who ever gave me the truth without blinking. I showed her a few of the documents, just enough to give her context, not enough to overwhelm her. Her reaction? Immediate. She started naming names. People Karen had cornered. Ones she had silenced with threats of fines or embarrassed into submission during meetings. One of them was a woman who'd been forced to repaint her house twice because the shade of beige was too institutional. Another was a retired veteran who got fined for flying an American flag that wasn't on an approved pole. Stacy still had her own stash of HOA letters too, 7 violations in 3 months, all tied to children's items visible from the street. Sidewalk chalk, a tricycle, a rubber ball in the yard. It was all there. She'd kept it, quietly, just in case, so we made a deal. She'd talk to the others, casually, nothing direct, no pressure, just see who else was fed up, who'd been burned, who might be willing to speak up if the time came. I told her not to tell anyone about Bob's file. Not yet. Meanwhile, I started building the case. Real case. Legal. I wasn't just going to yell into a void, I was going to make it official. I contacted a civil rights attorney I knew from a training seminar years back. He specialized in HOA abuse cases. Yeah, that's a thing. Apparently more common than people think. He'd seen power-hungry boards push people out of neighborhoods over garden gnomes and fence heights, said he'd been waiting for something like this, a case with legs, teeth, and a name the press would recognize. We met in a coffee shop halfway across town. I gave him a copy of the file. He didn't speak for 10 solid minutes while flipping through it, just kept shaking his head. When he finally looked up, he said, "Jack, this isn't just misconduct. This is racketeering in khakis." That's when I knew I wasn't imagining it anymore. This was real, tangible, and actionable, but I didn't stop there. I pulled the camera from my safe, the one Ellie found in the tree. I hadn't touched it since the night I brought it down. I handed it over to a buddy of mine in tech crimes. He's the kind of guy who can pull data off a toaster if you ask nicely. Said he'd check the card, see if there were backups, maybe trace where it came from. He told me not to get my hopes up, but that he'd give it a shot. I also filed a Freedom of Information request with the city for any HOA complaint records tied to our address over the last 5 years. Wanted to see how my name stacked up against others. Just the numbers. Nothing personal. Pattern recognition. If Karen had done this before, it'd be there. While I was doing all that, Ellie was watching me. Quiet, observant, the way she always was. She didn't ask a lot of questions, but one night she came into the office, sat down across from me and said, "You're not going to let her win, right?" I looked at her, took a deep breath, and said, "Not a damn chance." That was the night I sketched out the outline. Not just a legal response, but a full plan. Multiple tracks, all converging. Legal, procedural, community, and eventually, if needed, media. I wasn't going to swing blindly, I was going to walk her right into the spotlight and let her own words do the damage. No theatrics, no rage, just cold, hard truth with a flashlight on it. I wasn't looking for revenge, I was going for exposure, and I was going to make damn sure she never buried another neighbor in silence again. I didn't announce it. I didn't walk into the next HOA meeting holding Bob's folder like a trophy. That's not how you win a fight like this. You don't strut into a snake pit yelling you've got a stick. You wait until they slither into the light on their own. The first shot wasn't even aimed directly at Karen. It was subtle. Quiet. I called a contact I had over at the county auditor's office. Asked him to take a look at Willow Ridge's HOA financial disclosures. Not just the public ones, but the internal records. The ones that get filed for tax purposes. The ones most HOA boards hope no one ever asks to see. I didn't ask for anything shady, just made a formal request. Submitted a written inquiry with attached documents Bob had given me. No accusations. Just a request for clarification on a few line items that didn't seem to match up with public summaries. It's amazing what happens when the request comes with a sheriff's letterhead and a legally worded paragraph about possible fiscal discrepancies. That was move one. Then I had Stacy casually mention in her next neighborhood group chat that there'd been a complaint filed about misuse of HOA funds. She didn't name names, just dropped a little grenade into the group and walked away. It worked faster than I expected. Suddenly Karen was responding to posts she normally ignored. Writing long, windy explanations about standard operating procedures and pre-approved landscaping budgets and confidentiality agreements with vendors. People weren't buying it. She was sweating, and I hadn't even shown my hand yet. While that storm started to brew, my attorney sent an official preservation letter to the HOA board, demanding that all digital and written communication, invoices, decisions, meeting recordings, and internal emails be preserved for potential litigation. That's lawyer talk for. We're watching everything you do, and if you delete a single file, we'll bury you for obstruction. Karen got it, of course, had to, because 2 days later she showed up at my house. I opened the door to find her standing there in her usual pressed polo and khakis, clipboard nowhere in sight. That alone told me she wasn't there on HOA business. She was flanked by 2 board members I barely recognized. Yes, men types who probably thought she walked on water until recently. "Jack," she said, smile strained like a rubber band. "May we come in for a minute?" I stepped outside instead. "No need. What's up?" She tried to soften it, said she just wanted to clear the air. Asked if maybe there'd been a misunderstanding. Told me she hoped we could work toward a more collaborative dynamic. I kept a straight face. I was damn proud of myself for that. "You mean between the HOA and the guy you tried to have arrested?" "Neil Spiankat," I asked. One of the yes men winced. "Oh, Karen didn't blink. "I think we've both made some choices we'd like to revisit." That was her version of an apology. I didn't bite. Just told her I hoped she'd saved all her receipts, and that anything else she wanted to say should probably go through my attorney. Then I went back inside. The next week, the camera guy called me, the one who'd been digging into the wildlife cam Ellie found. He cracked the metadata on the SD card and found embedded device info, serial number, manufacturer tag, and jackpot, the purchase record. It was ordered through a bulk municipal vendor account used exclusively by the HOA, not Karen personally, but their equipment, their order history, tied to a user login with her email attached to the delivery. That gave me enough to subpoena the HOA's vendor correspondence. My lawyer filed it the same day, then came the newsletter. Karen's last-ditch effort. She mailed a full-color HOA bulletin to every house in the neighborhood, clarifying recent rumors, said that certain residents were spreading disinformation and threatening the integrity of the community with frivolous legal actions. She even quoted a fake line from the HOA charter that claimed all residents must submit written permission before contacting outside counsel about internal HOA matters. Illegal? No? Slimy as hell? Absolutely. It backfired. People started knocking on my door. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to. They wanted to know what was really going on. I showed them what I could. Stacy helped. She'd organized a little informal coffee gathering at her place, and I came by with printed copies of the most obvious violations. Nothing confidential, just enough to show the pattern, enough to let them connect the dots. The mood shifted. By the time the auditor's office sent an official inquiry to the HOA demanding clarification on 3 years of discrepancies, Karen was in full defense mode. Emergency meetings, late-night emails, sudden resignations from 2 board members who didn't want their names anywhere near this mess. Karen tried to clamp down. Sent out a letter saying all community meetings were temporarily suspended due to legal activity, but it was too late. The silence didn't protect her, it exposed her, and through all of it, I kept pressing. Every document Bob had given me, I indexed and scanned into a clean, organized case file. I built a timeline, cross-referenced it with the violations sent to homeowners. I mapped it all out. Her behavior, the fines, the threats, the manipulation, the whole damn web. I didn't scream, I didn't threaten, I didn't even raise my voice. I let the truth do the heavy lifting, and every step forward, every email sent, every new signature added to the growing complaint. Each one took the power away from her and gave it back to the people she thought were too scared to fight back. She still smiled when we crossed paths. That smug, fake country club smile like nothing was wrong. But her eyes, they weren't smiling anymore. She knew. The ground under her feet was starting to crack, and she could feel it. I wasn't done. Not even close. It happened slower than I thought it would. No fireworks, no dramatic courtroom outbursts, just one domino tipping into the next until the whole damn tower fell sideways in front of everyone. The first crack showed up at the county board meeting, not the HOA board. No, this was the real deal. County level, public record. Karen didn't know it was coming. The inquiry into the HOA's financials had made it through the red tape, and someone, God bless them, decided to include it on the open agenda. It wasn't even me who flagged it for the local news. Someone in the clerk's office must have passed it along. One day the agenda's sitting there, dusty and unread like always, and the next thing I know, a small local reporter calls my attorney asking for a comment on the investigation into possible HOA fund misuse in Willow Ridge. We didn't comment, didn't need to. That article hit the neighborhood like a lightning bolt. Not national news, not even citywide, but big enough to make the rounds on Nextdoor, Facebook, and every group chat Karen had spent years quietly patrolling. Suddenly people were talking, not whispering anymore. Talking out loud, at barbecues, at school pickup, standing in front yards like it was 1957 again. Everyone had a story. Every isolated incident started looking a whole lot more like a pattern. A few days later, Channel 8 ran a segment. Just 5 minutes tucked between weather and sports, but there it was. Video of our neighborhood entrance sign, overlaid with the words HOA funds under scrutiny. They didn't name her directly, but they didn't have to. The voiceover talked about allegations of systemic abuse, questionable fine patterns, and discriminatory enforcement of HOA policies. Karen held an emergency HOA board meeting that night. Closed door. No minutes published. No transparency. We all saw the lights on at the clubhouse late into the evening, her SUV parked outside with the motor running. No one was invited. No one left smiling. The next week, the auditor's office froze the HOA's discretionary spending account. I found that out from one of the neighbors who worked in accounting, said it was standard procedure during an active investigation when irregularities were confirmed. Confirmed. That word hit different. That same night, 3 families taped notices to their doors saying they were filing civil claims against the HOA. One was that veteran Karen tried to fine for flying the American flag. Another was a single mom who'd been cited 3 times in 1 month for visible recycling bins. Her kid had special needs. She never said a word about it until then, and then came the meeting. This one wasn't Karen's. Stacy organized it. Unofficial. At the community center gym, no rules, no minutes, no forced agendas, just a microphone, some folding chairs, and neighbors who'd had enough. We weren't sure how many people would show. I figured maybe 15, 20 if we were lucky. We ran out of chairs. People stood in the back, brought their kids, took notes, and when I walked up to speak, not as the sheriff, but as a neighbor, they actually listened. I didn't grandstand. I didn't wave the folder in the air like some courtroom drama. I just told the truth. I explained how the violations weren't random, how certain homeowners were targeted, how the money trail didn't match the work, how cameras were found, letters forged, rules twisted to fit whatever Karen decided she didn't like that day. I showed redacted copies of the financial logs Bob had given me, gave people the facts, let them draw their own lines. When I was done, I stepped back, and what happened next had nothing to do with me. One by one, they stood up. A woman I barely knew talked about being fined for a broken mailbox. Turns out it had been hit by a landscaping truck hired by the HOA. A teenager said she'd seen Karen yelling at her dad in the driveway, threatening him with legal action if he didn't clean up his yard, the yard that had just been professionally landscaped the week before. Stacy stood up and read her stack of violations like a grocery list. 7 of them in 3 months. Sidewalk chalk, remember? And through it all, Karen wasn't there. She knew better. By the time it ended, we had a petition in hand, not just to remove Karen as president, but to dissolve the current board and call for an independent management audit. The signatures filled 3 pages by the end of the night. People lined up to sign it. The next morning, Karen sent out an official letter on HOA letterhead claiming the meeting was unauthorized, invalid, and not in compliance with Willow Ridge procedural standards. But no one cared. The power had already shifted. The same neighbors who used to avoid eye contact were now asking where they could file their own complaints. The same folks who used to say, "That's just how HOAs are," were showing up with notebooks and receipts. Bob showed up at my house that afternoon. Didn't say much, just handed me an envelope with the last set of documents. He looked tired, lighter somehow. "You're doing the right thing," he said. I told him I was just finishing what he started. That night, I got a call from the State Attorney General's office. The investigation had officially moved beyond civil matters. They were opening a formal probe. Karen's reign was over. She just didn't know it yet. Things feel different now. The house is still the same creaky gates, same porch swing that leans a little to the left when it rains, same cedar tree standing out back, the one I planted for her. But the air around here, it's lighter, like someone opened a window that had been painted shut for years. Karen doesn't live here anymore. She sold her place in a rush, cash deal, barely packed. I watched her drive off. The morning the audit results were made public. No one waved. She didn't look back. One of the new families moved into her old house, a young couple with a toddler who loves chalk and a pit bull that runs circles in the yard. They put up a little birdhouse near the mailbox. Every time I walk by it, I smile. The HOA didn't die. We didn't burn it down, tempting as that was, but it changed. Real elections, real accountability, no more pink envelopes, no more secret meetings. The new board includes Stacy, an old guy named Glenn who used to keep to himself, and a retired teacher named Yolanda, who's tougher than anyone I ever met in uniform. They've got rules posted publicly now, and every decision gets a vote. Not perfect, but honest, and that counts. Ellie's back to riding her bike around the neighborhood. She doesn't flinch when she sees someone standing on a sidewalk anymore. That picture of her mom still hangs in the window, and no one's tried to tell us it violates anything. Last Halloween she went all out on decorations. Zombies on the porch, skeleton in the yard, fog machine under the bushes. You'd think she was running a haunted house. And you know what? The neighbors loved it. First time we had a real crowd on our street. Bob still keeps to himself, mostly. But I see him on his porch in the evenings sometimes. Cubs cap pulled low, a beer in hand, watching the world like he's finally at peace with it. We nod at each other now and then. That's all we need. And me? I sleep better. Not just because Karen's gone, not just because we won, but because I didn't let her change who I was. I didn't become what she was trying to paint me as. I stayed the course. I followed the truth. And that's what I'm proud of. People stop me sometimes. Ask how it all went down, like it was some big event they missed. I tell them pieces. I leave out a lot. Not because I'm hiding it, just because most folks don't need to know what it feels like to have your name dragged through the dirt on your own front lawn. They just want the ending. But every now and then, someone sticks around, wants the real story. So I tell them. I tell them about the gates, about the camera, about the lies and the folder, and the woman who thought power meant she could rewrite the rules. I tell them how the law doesn't always wear a badge, and how justice doesn't always come with a gavel, and I tell them the truth. That all of this, everything we went through, it wasn't about gates or paint colors or trash bins. It was about a line, a simple, invisible line between what's right and what's not, and what happens when someone crosses it thinking no one will stop them. Karen crossed it, and I stopped her. Not with noise, not with fists, but with facts, with help, with neighbors who finally looked up and realized they weren't alone. And now the neighborhood's quiet again, but not the kind of quiet where you're afraid to speak, the kind where you don't have to look over your shoulder. The kind where you know, for the first time in a long time, you're actually home.